and that will get our recording started. We will start on. We are in the middle of the fourth chapter of Daniel. If you'll flip over there, uh, and I want to remind us. I want to remind us as a reading here because we're talking about Daniel's now. Daniel. We're talking about Nebuchadnezzar's second dream now. Um, and I want to keep in our mind something we should never, ever, ever forget about this time is the position of Nebuchadnezzar. Now you remember we're at the we're um, at the exile of the southern kingdom of the kingdom of Judah when Babylon came in and conquered Judah and took a lot of the Israelites back up to Babylon. But we got to remember that this wasn't an exile like the northern kingdom had. Now the northern kingdom has already been gone for a generation or two at at the hands of the Assyrians, but their conquering and their exile was much worse. They were conquered by force. They were scattered. They were taken as slaves. Um, this was an ugly, ugly uh, punishment that the northern kingdom earned. The southern kingdom, not so much, although they lost their kingdom, they lost the temple, but they were fairly well treated by the Babylonians. In fact, in Daniel and his compatriots, they actually rose to high rank in the government of Babylon, and a lot of the Jews that were taken up there to Babylon achieved a lot of success in the Babylonian culture. So I want us to always keep in mind, especially the difference between the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom here and the position of Nebuchadnezzar. And I'm going to read again out of the 27th chapter of Jeremiah, and we know by reading Daniel's book, we know that Daniel was familiar with Jeremiah's prophecies because Jeremiah is still there. And Jeremiah's prophecies came at the end of the second kingdom's destruction. So we know that Daniel knew these prophecies, and he sort of refers to them a lot of places that lets us know that he knew these. But I'm going to read the 27th chapter of Jeremiah, and if you got notes in your Bible, make sure you make some notes here at this area of Daniel that this is referring to these prophecies of Jeremiah, which were made while while the southern kingdom was still intact. In fact, they were made, and we're about to read it here, they were made to the last king. So in the 27th chapter, I'm just going to read the first verse to remind us what's going on here. The 27th chapter of Jeremiah, first verse. In the beginning of the reign of Zedekiah, last king of Judah, in the beginning of the reign of Zedekiah, son of Joash, king of Judah, this word came to Jeremiah from the Lord, from Yahweh. That is telling that this prophecy is the word of God. Hey Becky, how are you doing?
Hi, I was hurrying so I could get on.
Well, we just started. We're
Okay,
just
great.
we're just reading the 27th chapter of Jeremiah to remind us of where we are, and then we'll
Okay.
jump back over to the fourth chapter of Daniel.
Okay, thank you.
In the beginning of the reign of Zedekiah, son of Joash, king of Judah, this word came to Jeremiah from the Lord, from Jehovah. This is God's word that we're about to read. So let's jump down to the sixth verse now. Now that's Yahweh, I have given all these lands to the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, my servant. And I have given him also the beasts of the field to serve him. All the nations shall serve him and his son and his grandson until the time of his own land comes. Then many nations and many great kings shall make him their slave. But if any nation or kingdom will not serve this Nebuchadnezzar king of Babylon and put its neck under the yoke of the king of Babylon, I will punish that nation with the sword, with famine, and with pestilence, declares the Lord, until I have consumed it by his hand. Nebuchadnezzar is ruling under God's authority. You see what it says? He's given him dominion over the land, and even dominion over the beast of the field. Even dominion over the beast of the field. Nebuchadnezzar is not like Assyria. Assyria is just a barbarous nation whom God allowed to conquer the northern kingdom. Nebuchadnezzar is put here specifically under God's authority to rule not only his nation, but all the nations in this area and even the beasts of the field. So Nebuchadnezzar is something special here. Let's never forget that. So we left off last week. We went over Nebuchadnezzar's dream. And we went over Nebuchadnezzar's dream, and now we're ready to look at the interpretation of the dream. All right, and this is the question um, that Geraldine brought up about the stump. If you remember, the dream was about a great tree that gave shade to the beasts, that gave them protection, shade, gave them food. It's just like God said. He gave Nebuchadnezzar dominion over the land and the beasts. And this tree Nebuchadnezzar dreamed about turns out to be him. So let's look at the interpretation here. And remember, the tree was told to be cut down by a messenger from the heavens. We know it as an angel. This is a messenger from God that Nebuchadnezzar saw in his dream to his mind. And remember, this is Nebuchadnezzar speaking here. This chapter is Nebuchadnezzar's own voice. So he knows it as a heavenly being. We know it as an angel. And the angel tells him to cut the tree down and to bind it with a band of iron and a band of bronze. So we look at the interpretation now. We're in Daniel, the 4th chapter, and verse 19. Then Daniel, whose name was Belshazzar, was dismayed for a while, and his thoughts alarmed him. Remember, the king has asked him to interpret the dream. So Daniel, whose name was Belshazzar, was dismayed for a while, and his thoughts alarmed him. The king answered and said, Belshazzar, let not the dream or the interpretation alarm you. Belshazzar answered and said, Daniel, my lord, may the dream be for those who hate you, and its interpretation be for your enemies. Daniel is a little bit nervous about giving the interpretation because Daniel sees it very bad, going very badly for Nebuchadnezzar. But Nebuchadnezzar, remember, Nebuchadnezzar is something special here. He is not just some barbarous king. He was chosen by God for this duty. And Nebuchadnezzar recognized that Daniel was a little bit apprehensive, so he calms his fears and says, give me the interpretation no matter what it is. So Daniel calms down, and he even says, I wish this dream were for one of your enemies, because that's how much respect Daniel has for Nebuchadnezzar, because remember, Daniel understood the prophecy of Jeremiah. Daniel knew that this was God's appointed leader. So Daniel had tremendous respect for him, just like Joseph had respect. Well, not even respect. Joseph understood when Joseph was in a position, even after Joseph had been anointed by Samuel as king, Saul was still anointed king. It was God's position to remove Saul in his time, in God's time. And David understood that, even though he was anointed, and even though he had probably a legal right to do that. But Saul, remember, Joseph said, I will not lift my hand against God's anointed. Joseph had a position in that cave when Saul came in to relieve himself and Joseph was hiding in there. Joseph could have killed him and taken the kingdom for himself legally, but not in God's eyes. Joseph said, I will not lift my hand against this. And Daniel is saying something along the lines of, I understand that this is God's anointed, and I wish that this punishment were for somebody else or some of his enemies. But
I think you meant David there.
David, sorry, I said
You
Joseph,
kept
didn't I?
saying,
I
yeah,
said
yes, you
Joseph.
did.
David, David. So this is this is another reason that we're pretty sure that Daniel understood and was very familiar with the prophecies of Jeremiah. So we pick up on verse 20. The tree you saw, which grew and became strong so that its top reached to heaven, and it was visible to the end of the whole earth, whose leaves were beautiful and its fruit abundant, and in which was food for all, under which the beasts of the field find shade, and in those branches the birds of the heavens lived. It is you, O king, who have grown and become strong. Your greatness has grown and reaches to heaven, and your dominion to the ends of the earth. And because the king saw a watcher, a holy one, coming down from heaven and saying, chop down the tree and destroy it, but leave the stump and its roots in the earth, bound with a band of iron and bronze, in the tender grass of the field, and let him be wet with the dew of heaven, and let his portion be with the beasts of the fields, until 7 periods of time pass over him. This interpretation, O king, this is the interpretation, O king. It is the decree of the Most High, which has come upon my lord the king, that you shall be driven from among men, and your dwelling be with the beasts of the field. You shall be made to eat grass like an ox, and you shall be wet with the dew of heaven, and 7 periods of time shall pass over you, till you know that the Most High rules the kingdom of men, and gives it to whom he will. And as it was commanded to leave the stump of the roots of the tree, your kingdom shall be confirmed for you from the time that you will for the time that you know that heaven rules. Therefore, O king, let my counsel be acceptable to you. Break off your sins by practicing righteousness, and your iniquities by showing mercy to the oppressed, that there may be perhaps a lengthening of your prosperity. So Daniel's interpretation right there, that the kingdom that this kingdom was given to him by God so that he has dominion over, as he says, the whole of the earth. And the whole of the earth means as far as we know. Even the beasts of the fields are protected by Nebuchadnezzar's kingship. But he's gotten off track. And God is sending, in the same way that God sent punishment to his people, he's sending punishment to this king that he has given dominion. He's sending a punishment so that he will know who God is. So that's where we
Yeah.
sit. Yes. Question, Heather?
That amount of years as 7 So they mean 3.5 years? They
The
said 7 times.
the literal translation is 7 times. Times, 7 times. So this is 7 periods of time. We don't really know. Years, months, weeks, nobody really knows how long Nebuchadnezzar's mind left him, because the literal translation is, and the English Standard, is that, yeah, the English Standard here that I'm reading from has a decent translation. It says 7 periods of time. So we don't really know how long it was, but 7 periods of time. So now other questions. If you guys have questions, stop me. Stop me. Verse 28, or yeah, all this came upon King Nebuchadnezzar. At the end of 12 months, he was walking on the roof of the royal palace of Babylon. And the king answered and said, is not this great Babylon, which I have built by my mighty power as a royal residence for the glory of my majesty? While the words were still in his mouth, there fell a voice from heaven, King Nebuchadnezzar, to you it is spoken, the kingdom has departed from you, and you shall be driven from among men, and your dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field, and you shall be made to eat grass like an ox. And 7 periods of time shall pass over you, until you know that the Most High rules the kingdom of men, and gives to whom he will. Immediately the word was fulfilled against Nebuchadnezzar. He was driven from among men, and ate grass like an ox, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven, until his hair grew as long as eagle's feathers, and his nails were like bird's claws. No sooner, no sooner, a year after this, after Daniel interpreted the dream, a year, it says at the end of 12 months, no sooner that Nebuchadnezzar had got out, man, I am the greatest, that God reminded him of what happened 12 months ago, of the interpretation of his dream that Daniel gave him 12 months ago. And Daniel warned him. You look at that last verse of the second paragraph. Therefore, O king, let my counsel be acceptable to you. Break off your sins by practicing righteousness, and your iniquities by showing mercy to the oppressed, that there may perhaps be a lengthening of your prosperity. And he did it for a year. He kept his mouth for a year. But then at the end of that year, he just couldn't help it. Look at the magnificence of my kingdom. I've done this all on my own. And no sooner than those words were out, that God pronounced the punishment upon him. I told you whose kingdom this was, Nebuchadnezzar. I told you. Daniel told you. Now you have to face your punishment. Now you have to face your punishment. And for these 7 periods of time, Nebuchadnezzar completely lost his mind. He turned into a raving lunatic.
Isn't it a lesson though for every so-called self-made person?
Yep, that's
I mean,
exactly right.
yeah, kind of in a way, we've all been guilty at some
Oh
point of
yeah.
pride. Yeah.
Yep, you say, oh man, I have worked. You buy you a nice house. I have worked for years to afford this house. Look at what I bought. Nope. Nope, 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 nope. That house was a gift of God. You worked hard for it, true. But without God behind you, that house would not be yours any more than it is for a beast of the field. That lesson right there. And it's harder, I think, for people who do well, like Nebuchadnezzar. He had tremendous temptation on him. Tremendous temptation. Elon Musk, tremendous temptation to say, look at what I've done. I mean, our president, look at they tried to keep me down, and I got elected twice. Although President Trump seems to have a little bit of a sense as to who gave him, who, who, who pushed that bullet just a little bit to the left or to the right, just a touch, and who gave him that victory. The president seems to understand, at least, and looks like it, who he owes his office to. Nebuchadnezzar forgot. So he was driven from among men and ate grass like an ox. Verse 34. And this is again Nebuchadnezzar. Remember, Nebuchadnezzar is speaking all this. And you'll notice as he talks about the uh, as he talks about the losing of his mind, he switches. He switches and he goes from I have built my mighty power to he goes to describing himself as a he. He doesn't talk about he was driven from among men, and you shall be made to eat grass like an ox. He switches tenses there. He goes from talking about, and anytime that we go through bad times, especially if we had really bad times, we tend to think of that person as somebody else. That wasn't me. That wasn't me. I have changed. You think of yourself before your conversion and you think that person over there. So we see that in Nebuchadnezzar's description up here too. So verse 34, at the end of the days, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted my eyes to heaven, and my reason returned to me. And I blessed the Most High, and praised and honored him who lives forever. For his dominion is an everlasting dominion, and his kingdom endures from generation to generation. All the inhabitants of the earth are accounted as nothing, and he does according to his will among the host of heaven and among the inhabitants of the earth, and none can stay his hand or say to him, what have you done? That, if you read one of the Psalms, this reads like any of the Psalms here. For his dominion is everlasting. His kingdom endures from generation to generation. That could be a psalm. That could be any one of the psalms there. And then we go to verse 36. Yep. At the same time, my reason returned to me, and for the glory of my kingdom, my majesty and splendor returned to me. My counselors and my lords sought me, and I was established in my kingdom, and still more greatness was added to me. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and extol and honor the King of heaven, for all his works are right, and his ways are just, and those who walk in pride he is able to humble. Nebuchadnezzar learned a tough lesson there, because he was taken from from the realm of humanity. into the realm of an animal mind. And he understands now, at least in his pagan understanding of the gods, that this God of the Hebrews, who's already shown him his power 2 or 3 times, he understands that this must be one of the great gods. Because remember, this is a pagan mind here, who still has not gotten rid of his pagan roots completely. Because if you'll notice, he never addresses God's name. He calls him the King of Heaven. He never addresses God as Jehovah. Daniel knew God's name. Daniel probably referred to God's name before, but Nebuchadnezzar never says God's name. So a lot of people think he was converted here, that he called upon the name of the Lord, because it's the same in the Old Testament it is New. You call upon the name of the Lord and you will be saved.
That's
We
the way
didn't.
I feel about it, based on what you read in chapter 7 when we get
Yep.
to it, because it said a man's heart was given to him.
Yep.
So that, but anyway, that's just me.
Right. And there's debate either way. I don't think he was converted. He certainly learned a lesson, and he learned a lot about God's character, but I don't think he went all the way. But like Jeff said, that's just me. I don't know. So Geraldine asked about the stump, the cutting down of the stump, and she asked, was that his kingdom that was reserved for him? And yes, according to Daniel's interpretation, that was Babylon. The tree stood for Babylon, not just Nebuchadnezzar. The tree stood for the kingdom of Babylon. When that tree was cut down, it was reserved. The roots were preserved in the earth. Because you cut down a tree, it's the right kind of tree, it will come back. And that's exactly what they are referring to here. That Daniel reminds us is that root was reserved for Nebuchadnezzar if he repented, if he saw who God was. And sure enough, he did, because it says, at the end of the days, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted my eyes to heaven, and my reason returned to it. So Nebuchadnezzar, when God saw that his mind was in a place where he had learned his lesson, God returned his mind to him, and also, when we read down through there, also his kingdom. But as with prophecy, there's some prophecy that sets an event in the future that is to happen, and we wait, we look for it. There's some prophecy that describes something that's going to happen very soon, and we look for that. There's some prophecies, though, and this is what makes dealing with prophecy so difficult, that does both. And I'm not sure, and this is where all of you guys come into the discussion, I'm not sure that this not only describes Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom that returns to him in 7 times, 7 periods of time, but I'm not sure, and Jeff and I were yapping about this on Sunday, I'm not sure that this is describing also the roots that are still bound by iron and bronze of Babylon, that are still buried in the earth and still waiting to come back. So, thinking about that for a minute, what do you see? Do you see that this could be a prophecy about, because if you've looked ahead into Revelation, or or you've studied or seen a class on Revelation, you know that one of the big actors at the end of Revelation, towards the end, Babylon comes roaring back. And I'm just thinking that this prophecy, this second dream of Nebuchadnezzar's, not only was Nebuchadnezzar's return, his kingdom was returned to him, but I'm thinking that this is a foreshadowing, and this is why you can't understand Revelation without understanding Daniel first. I think that God is showing us that Babylon is still there, bound by a ring of brass, a ring of bronze, and a ring of iron. It's bound and waiting. And God is going to release that kingdom again. And I think we see it in Revelation. What do you think? What do you think? Anybody got any thoughts? And I want you, if you don't have any thoughts, maybe you need to think this week.
Um, I have a question.
Yes,
Um, if the original dream about the statue and the feet were iron and clay, where do you get the bronze from?
bronze was the thighs.
Right.
There was a head of gold, which is Babylon.
Yeah.
The chest and arms of silver, which is our next kingdom that we're gonna get to in chapter 5. That's the Medes and the Persians, the
Okay.
Medo-Persian Empire. And then we get to the thighs, the belly and thighs of bronze, which is Greece. And
So,
and we're actually
the,
told that here.
okay. So the rings of iron and rings of bronze. What are you referring to?
In the dream, in verse 15, jump up to verse
Okay.
15, but leaving the stump of its roots in the earth, bound with a band of iron and bronze amid the tender grass of the field.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So that that was part of the dream. When the tree was cut down, it was bound by a band of iron and bronze,
Oh,
and
yes.
and
Okay.
the roots were left in the earth. And Daniel interprets that as your kingdom will be reserved for you when you come to your senses.
Okay.
But
Okie
I'm
dokie.
looking.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Becky.
I said okie dokie. I'm
Okay.
sorry. I
No, no.
didn't read it right.
Questions are what I live for. That root, I just can't get around that is a prophecy, not only of Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom returning to him, but this is also a prophecy of Babylon returning at the end, because we do see it in Revelation, and when we hit there, we're going to come right back here and look at it. The band of iron and bronze, though, that one's the one that I've been thinking about, because just like Becky brought up, that statue, the bronze is Greece, and the iron was Rome, and the iron goes all the way to the feet. Even though the feet are a mixture, they're a mixture of iron and clay. So I think that those bands are to remind us that this binding of Babylon is going to be until the end, because bronze and iron are the very end of the statue. Remember when the rock that comes from the mountain comes and shatters the feet of the statue and the whole thing is destroyed, iron is at the end. And I think maybe those bands of iron and bronze are to remind us that it's the Greek Empire and the Roman Empire that bind Babylon. I don't know. I don't know, but that I the the Bible has a band of iron and bronze in there for a reason. It's not just to sound pretty.
Well, I look at it also that the Greek and the Roman Empire both borrowed from each other and borrowed from
Yep.
Babylon. So, I mean, you can't get around it. They even
Right.
say it Greco-Roman.
Right.
It,
Greco-Roman. Right.
so that's the way I look at
Yeah.
it. That
So
those are
I
the ones that have the final influence on humanity.
yeah. I can't see that band of iron and bronze being in there just for looks. I think that is telling us something about the very end of it all. The very end of it all. All right, we're about out of time, so I want to kind of wrap up here. We're at the end of Nebuchadnezzar's rule here. Chapter 4, remember, was Nebuchadnezzar's voice. This is Nebuchadnezzar's voice here. Chapter 5, though, we're switching back to Daniel's voice, and we're going to talk about the transition from Babylon to the Medo-Persian Empire in
Hey,
chapter 5.
Norm,
Yes.
that reminds me of the woman that rides the beast.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
This and folks, you can't understand Revelation without Daniel. You can't, because the woman, the beast, all the beasts in Revelation, they're all told to us in Daniel.
That one world religion.
Yep,
Mm-hmm.
the one world religion. And remember, Nebuchadnezzar put Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the Babylonian schools to teach them the religions and the customs of Babylon. And they learned them. They learned them better than the Babylonians did, but they never got taken in by them. A lot of the Jews did. A lot of the Jews shifted their culture to the culture of Babylon. And we'll see this towards the end of the captivity. But they got the reason they had them in there was to acclimate them to Babylonian culture, to make them part of Babylon, the world. And that's what we always have to keep in mind up here, is that we aren't called to be like all of those people out there. We're called to be different. We're called to be different. We're God's people, not the world's people. So, end of chapter 4. Think about chapter 4 this week, about the stump. And then we're going to go ahead in chapter 5 next week and start the transition over to the Medo-Persian Empire. I'm going to talk a little bit about that next week and answer any questions that you come up with. Think about these things.
I have a stupid question.
No such thing, but go ahead and ask it.
Well, you'll see. I keep thinking if God made him into a cow to teach him a lesson, what did the people think? I mean,
They exiled him. As soon as they saw him turn into this lunatic, remember it says he was driven from the world of man. I believe is the direct the words with this in the kingdom. And you shall be driven from among men, and your dwelling shall be the beasts of the field. His own people drove him out because he was a lunatic. He was a lunatic. So
So his own people didn't see it was the hand of God.
right, they thought he just lost his mind, and they didn't
Okay.
want him running a kingdom with a being a lunatic. So yeah, they booted him. But God reserved that kingdom for him. So there
Yeah.
apparently wasn't anybody that stepped in behind him. So that's the hand of God. The hand of God reserved that kingdom for him, just as he said he would.
Didn't Daniel kind of take over while he was absent?
Probably, probably, since Daniel was so high and Daniel understood what was going on. That's a good point, Bonnie. Daniel probably kind of ran things as if he was still there, and some people may not have even known he was gone.
I thought I read that somewhere.
That's a very good observation. Daniel probably stepped in and ran things because Daniel knew what the prophecy was.
Well, thank you, Norm.
Yep. Any other questions before we go? We're just about out of time. Any other questions? Chapter 5 next week, but think about that stump that we got left. We got another riddle to solve.
Great lesson, Norm.
Yeah, good lesson, buddy.
All
Thank
righty.
you.
You guys
Hurry up,
Goodbye,
have a good
Norm.
everybody.
week.
Yeah, God bless
You
everybody.
too,
God bless
Norm.
you all. We
Yes.
love y'all.
God bless. Love you.